Las Vegas, August 17th, 1974. The spotlight caught a shimmer of white sequins as Elvis leaned into the mic. But tonight, he wasn't singing for the thousands screaming his name. He was singing for one small girl in the front row. When Lisa Marie whispered something back, the entire arena went silent. Las Vegas Hilton, August 17th, 1974. The air trembled before the curtain even lifted. 20,000 people packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the golden lights, the hum of anticipation blending with cigarette smoke and camera flashes. The chandeliers swayed gently from the vibration of the crowd's chant, "Elvis! Elvis!" Then the orchestra hit the first note. Trumpets soared, drums thundered, and the curtain split open to reveal him. Elvis Presley, dressed in his white Phoenix jumpsuit, studded with sapphire stones that caught the light like fire. His voice rolled through the hall with a warmth that felt both holy and human. But something about him was different that night. His usual grin, the one fans knew by heart, flickered, then faded. Between verses, his gaze drifted to the front row, again and again. There, beneath the stage lights, sat a little girl in a red velvet dress, her feet barely touching the floor. Lisa Marie Presley, 6 years old, clutching a small paper heart she'd made backstage. He winked at her once, then returned to the microphone. "Good evening, Las Vegas," he said softly, and the crowd exploded. Yet his eyes stayed on her, even as he launched into Burning Love. Behind him, guitarist James Burton noticed it too. "He's singing to somebody tonight," he whispered to the bassist, and both nodded. Through the heat and roar, the spotlight swung from gold to pale blue. Elvis's movements slowed. His energy felt contained, focused. For years, he had given everything to strangers screaming his name. But in that moment, it was as if all that noise had faded, leaving only a father and his daughter in the middle of a storm of sound. What happens to a man when fame becomes background noise and love becomes the only song that matters? Halfway through the set, as the band transitioned to Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis glanced at Lisa again. She mouthed something to him, a secret between them, and he smiled faintly, shaking his head in disbelief. A father's heart beneath the world's spotlight. He finished the song with a drawn-out final note, one that seemed to tremble not from power, but from emotion. When the last chord faded, a strange silence filled the room. Not the usual pause before applause, but a shared breath, as if the crowd somehow knew they were witnessing something private. And then, applause erupted like thunder. But behind that smile, Elvis's mind was somewhere else, already thinking about what he'd say next, about the words that had just passed between him and his daughter. Because before the night was over, Elvis would stop the music entirely and dedicate a song that would change the way people saw him forever. The house lights dimmed again as the orchestra shifted into a soft interlude. Sweat glistened on Elvis's brow, but his hands trembled, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. He adjusted the mic, exhaled, and for a moment, he looked less like the king of rock and roll, and more like a man trying to find the right words for someone he loved. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his southern drawl steady but low, "I'd like to do this next one for someone real special tonight." The audience hushed instantly. Even the waitstaff froze mid-step. Lisa Marie turned in her seat, her small hands still holding the folded paper heart she'd made hours earlier in the dressing room. Priscilla placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling softly. The moment felt suspended in air, like the calm before lightning. Elvis took a deep breath. "This one's for my baby girl," he whispered into the mic. His voice cracked slightly on the word baby, a word the world wasn't used to hearing from him on stage. Gasps rippled through the audience, then silence. The first notes filled the room, slow, tender, reverent. He sang differently now, quieter, almost as if afraid to break the spell. Each lyric carried the weight of a promise, of love that fame could never erase. The camera flashbulbs fired again, lighting his face in white bursts, and the shimmer of tears caught in his eyes was visible even from the balcony. A woman in the third row began to cry quietly. A young man beside her lowered his camera. Something about seeing Elvis, this icon, looking down at his daughter while singing "Love Me Tender," made the room feel sacred. But halfway through the second verse, something unexpected happened. Elvis's voice faltered for a split second, the lyric slipping past him. He turned his head toward Lisa. She had leaned forward, mouthing something. Only he could hear it. His lips twitched into a small, trembling smile. He nodded once, blinked hard, and continued the song with renewed emotion. That one whisper, whatever she said, seemed to steady him, lift him, remind him of something beyond the stage lights. What did she say to him? What could a child possibly whisper that would make the king stop mid-song and start again like a man reborn? Behind the curtain, bandmates exchanged glances. "He's never done that before," whispered guitarist Charlie Hodge. "Never dedicated one like this." When the song ended, there was no immediate applause, just stillness. Then, as if a wave had broken, the crowd erupted. Standing ovation, thousands of hands clapping in rhythm, tears streaming down faces illuminated by gold light. Elvis bowed once, then looked back at Lisa. The faintest smile touched his lips. The world saw a performer. She saw her father. But what no one realized yet, what would only be known later, was that the whisper he heard would stay with him for the rest of his life, because that small voice, lost beneath the echo of applause, would soon become the reason behind a decision that would change his final years forever. The applause thundered through the Hilton showroom like rolling waves, but behind that sound was a stillness that only Elvis felt. He stepped back from the microphone, trying to breathe past the emotion tightening in his chest. The crowd saw confidence, but his heart was racing. That whisper, Lisa's tiny voice through the noise, was still echoing in his mind. Security shifted near the stage edge. Elvis was supposed to begin the next number immediately. Suspicious minds. But instead, he lowered his guitar. "Hold on just a minute," he said into the mic, his tone calm but firm. The orchestra froze mid-intro. Heads turned. He was breaking the script. He walked toward the stage stairs, ignoring the puzzled looks from his crew. Charlie Hodge whispered urgently, "Hey, we're live! What are you doing?" But Elvis only smiled. "Just give me a second, Charlie." The audience gasped as he stepped down into the pit, then onto the floor. His boots clicked against the marble as he made his way toward the front row. Flashbulbs exploded like lightning, the world's biggest star, walking into his own crowd. Lisa's eyes widened. She held the folded paper heart to her chest as Elvis knelt beside her. The cameras tried to follow, but the lights dimmed slightly, leaving the two of them in a golden glow. "You remember this song, honey?" he asked softly. She nodded, smiling shyly. Then she leaned close and whispered again, just as before. Only this time, the nearest microphone caught a faint trace of her words. A breathy, almost inaudible, "Don't stop singing, Daddy." The arena went dead silent. For a moment, even time seemed to pause. Elvis's eyes softened, his jaw tightened, and a small laugh escaped him. Half joy, half heartbreak. He turned back toward the stage, but his steps were slower now, heavier. Every flashbulb seemed to echo her words in light. "Don't stop singing." As he climbed back up, one of the stage hands whispered, "She got to him." Another replied, "He's been tired lately. That might be what keeps him going." Back at the mic, Elvis took a long breath. He looked across the hall, at the thousands who had come for the legend, and then back to the one who saw him simply as a dad. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. "She told me to keep singing, folks. Even if I get tired." The audience erupted. Standing applause. Tears streamed down faces everywhere. Fans held up signs, waving scarves, shouting, "Ha! We love you, Elvis!" But the king's smile wasn't the one he gave for the cameras. It was smaller, private, like a secret promise between him and Lisa Marie. Have you ever had someone remind you why you started something in the first place? The kind of reminder that pierces the noise and reaches the soul. The band picked up again, But Elvis's rhythm had changed. He sang Can't Help Falling in Love not as an encore, but as a confession. His voice trembled between strength and surrender. Each lyric sounded like a vow to his fans, but more to her. The Hilton stage had hosted magicians, dancers, and stars beyond measure. But that night, every single person there would later say they felt it, a moment that wasn't meant for them, yet somehow belonged to everyone. As the final note faded, Elvis closed his eyes and whispered something to himself before leaving the stage. The cameras didn't catch it, the microphones didn't record it, but one sound engineer backstage swore he heard it faintly through the feed. That's my baby's song now. No one knew it yet, but that whisper, those 5 small words, would echo far beyond Las Vegas. In the years ahead, it would guide the choices Elvis made and the legacy he would leave behind. For a few seconds after that whisper, the world seemed to hang in mid-air. The orchestra stood frozen, brass raised, strings trembling in silence. Elvis looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces gone still, thousands holding their breath. In that pause, every light, every sound in the Hilton showroom felt suspended around a single man and his little girl. He took a step back, blinked hard, then faced the audience again. The weight of the moment sat heavy in his chest, but he smiled through it, that signature smile that could still break hearts. She just told me, he said quietly into the mic, to keep singing, even if I get tired. At first the room was silent. Then a wave of applause surged through the hall. The kind that doesn't just sound loud, it feels loud, deep in your ribs. Fans stood, hands over their mouths, eyes glistening. A woman near the stage shouted, "We love you, Elvis!" And he nodded toward her with that soft, grateful tilt of his head. But behind the lights, those who knew him, the band, the crew, exchanged looks. They understood the deeper meaning in that moment, because everyone backstage had seen how tired he'd been, how his eyes stayed open long after the shows, flipping through photo albums, whispering prayers before bed. They knew that whisper from his daughter wasn't just sweet, it was saving him. I saw it in his face that night, Jerry would later recall. That little girl's words brought him back to life, even if just for a while. The next song began, but the air was different now. When the opening chords of Bridge Over Troubled Water filled the room, Elvis didn't just sing, he poured. The gospel in his voice hit deeper, more raw, each lyric rising from somewhere far beneath the rhinestones. The crowd stood in reverent stillness, hundreds of flashes going off, tears glistening under the gold light. Some swayed, some just stared, completely silent. The noise that usually drowned the emotion was gone. The arena wasn't cheering a performer. It was witnessing a man rediscovering why he sang in the first place. As the last verse echoed, Elvis lifted his hand slightly, not toward the fans, but toward Lisa. "That's for you, honey," he said, voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. The camera caught that moment, a fleeting frame where the world's biggest entertainer looked like nothing more than a proud, tearful father. What would it feel like to stand before thousands, yet be moved by just one voice, a whisper that cuts through everything you've built? The show continued, but nothing afterward felt the same. The jokes, the stage banter, all softer, lighter. Every song carried a new kind of sincerity, as though the king had traded glamour for grace. The audience could feel it too. Some fans later wrote in letters that it was the night Elvis's music felt like prayer. And when he finally took his bow, head lowered, cape draped like angel wings behind him, the Hilton audience rose in unison. The sound was deafening, but for a heartbeat before he walked off stage, the applause dimmed in his ears. And the only sound he heard was her voice again, that little whisper looping in his mind. He turned once more before exiting, pointing gently toward the front row. "Good night, darling," he said. "Daddy heard you." That night wasn't just another concert. It was a father's turning point, a moment that would echo through every song, every stage, and every letter written after. But the true meaning of Lisa's whisper wouldn't be revealed until what happened backstage, moments later. The curtains closed behind him, sealing off the roar of 20,000 voices. Backstage, the air was quieter, thicker somehow. The faint smell of hairspray, sweat, and hot stage lights hung like smoke. Elvis tugged at his collar, catching his breath as a stagehand handed him a towel. But his eyes weren't on the mirrors or the flowers waiting in his dressing room. They were still searching for that one small figure in the crowd. Moments later, Lisa Marie came running down the corridor, escorted by Priscilla. Her tiny shoes tapped against the tiled floor like a heartbeat. "Daddy!" she cried. He turned, dropped to one knee, and opened his arms. The rhinestones on his jumpsuit caught the hallway lights as she leapt into his chest. For a moment, the king of rock and roll disappeared. In his place was just a father holding his little girl, his hands shaking as if he'd found something he didn't know he was missing. He pulled back slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Did you mean it, baby, what you said?" Lisa nodded solemnly. "Yes, Daddy. Don't stop singing, even when you're tired." He smiled, tired but lighter now, and kissed her forehead. "I won't, sweetheart. I promise." Behind them, Priscilla watched quietly. She knew how fragile these moments were, how rarely Elvis allowed himself to slow down. Fame had become both a blessing and a cage. And this small whisper from his daughter had just reminded him why he started singing all those years ago. Not for fame, not for money, but for connection. Later that night, after Lisa and Priscilla left for the hotel, a stagehand found a small, crumpled paper heart on the dressing room counter. In Lisa's uneven handwriting were the words, "I love you." "Daddy, don't stop singing." He placed it carefully on the vanity beside Elvis's Bible. Jerry Schilling entered quietly, carrying Elvis's water and towel. "You okay, E?" he asked. Elvis didn't answer right away. He was staring at that paper heart, his reflection flickering in the mirror lights. "She saved me tonight, Jerry," he finally said, his voice low. "She don't even know it," Jerry nodded. "You've still got a lot of songs left in you, man." Elvis exhaled, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Yeah, for her, I'll keep singing." How many times do we need to be reminded of what truly matters before we start listening? That night, long after everyone else had gone, the stage lights dimmed one by one. Alone in the empty showroom, Elvis sat at the edge of the stage, still in his jumpsuit, the paper heart resting in his hand. He hummed the melody of "Love Me Tender" under his breath, the same song that had begun it all. Somewhere far down the hall, a janitor paused his sweeping to listen. The king was still singing, softly, almost like a prayer. What no one knew was that from that night on, that tiny folded heart would travel with him everywhere, from Vegas to Memphis, and would be found years later, tucked between the pages of his Bible at Graceland. Years later, long after the Las Vegas lights dimmed and the Hilton crowds had moved on, the paper heart resurfaced, framed in glass, resting in the music room at Graceland. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Lisa Marie's Note, August 17th, 1974. Visitors would stand in front of it in silence, often without realizing they were staring at the moment that had changed Elvis forever. After that night in Vegas, something in Elvis shifted. His friends noticed it. Less restless pacing, more quiet reflection. He still poured his soul into every concert, but now there was tenderness threaded through each song. It wasn't the raw fire of youth anymore. It was something deeper, more grounded. Every thank you very much, carried a different kind of warmth. He'd touched that note before going on stage, Jerry Schilling once said in an interview. Like a ritual. Some folks wear lucky charms. He carried a promise. Touring wasn't easy. The pressure, the exhaustion, the long nights alone in hotel rooms. They all pressed heavy on him. But that simple message, written in a child's uneven handwriting, became his anchor. Don't stop singing. Those words turned from a whisper into a lifeline. Even the fans noticed the change. At his 1976 concert in Asheville, one reviewer wrote, "Elvis didn't just perform, he confessed. His music feels like a conversation with someone who isn't on stage." At Graceland, years later, Lisa Marie would sometimes walk the same hallway her father once did, stopping by the piano where he used to play gospel hymns late at night. She'd rest her hand on the ivory keys, feeling the same quiet stillness he once sought. On the nearby shelf sat the old Bible, the edges worn and pages soft from years of handling. Tucked between Psalms and Corinthians was that same folded heart, its paper now yellowed, but the ink still clear. Have you ever seen something small, a note, a photograph, a word, hold more meaning than any treasure? Fans who visited Graceland said the energy in that room felt sacred. One woman described it in a letter. It's not sadness you feel there, it's peace, like he's still listening. And in a way he was. The sound engineers who remastered his recordings in the early 80s said they found faint background hums in certain Vegas tapes. The same show where the whisper happened. It's like a voice caught between the notes, one of them said, almost like the room remembering. Soft focus dissolved from Vegas stage to Graceland piano, slow camera pan over framed heart. That paper heart became more than a memory. It became a bridge between father and daughter, between artist and audience, between a man and his own humanity. Even now, when fans line up outside Graceland each August, many leave notes of their own. Messages tucked beneath the gates. Keep singing, Elvis. We heard her whisper too, but before the story settles into legacy, one final moment remained, one that would close the circle forever. Lisa's return to that same song, years later, when she sang it for him. It was the summer of 1997, 2 decades after that night in Las Vegas. The crowd inside Graceland's candlelit memorial hall was hushed. Hundreds gathered to mark the anniversary of Elvis's passing. In the front row sat Lisa Marie, now grown, her eyes tracing the same piano, the same framed note that once rested in her father's hands. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice quiet but steady. This was his song, she said, glancing toward the photo of Elvis in his white jumpsuit. But it was also ours. When she began to sing Love Me Tender, the room filled with the kind of silence that speaks louder than applause. Every lyric seemed to circle back through time, carrying echoes of her 6-year-old self in that red velvet seat. Halfway through the song, her voice trembled. She paused, smiling through tears. He told me once, she whispered, that I gave him a reason to keep singing. I think I understand that now. The audience, fans, family, and old bandmates, rose slowly to their feet. Some closed their eyes. Some mouthed the words along with her. In the back row, Jerry Schilling wiped his eyes, whispering to no one. He'd be proud, Lisa. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a homecoming, a daughter returning her father's promise, finishing the song he'd started decades ago. And when the final note faded, the crowd didn't cheer. They stood in stillness, just as they had that night in 1974. Have you ever noticed how love doesn't disappear? It just changes shape? Later that evening, as the candles burned low and the crowd dispersed, Lisa lingered by the piano. Her hand brushed against the glass frame holding that same paper heart. She whispered softly, "I didn't stop singing either, Daddy." Outside, the Memphis night air was thick and warm, cicadas humming in the distance. The faint glow of Graceland's lights shimmered against the gates, where fans had once again pinned their own notes. Thousands of them. And somewhere between the hum of crickets and the wind through the trees, you could almost imagine the faint echo of a familiar voice, still singing. Because legends don't end when the music stops. They live on in the whispers that refuse to fade. Slow pan from framed paper heart to open Bible, then dissolve into stage footage of Elvis smiling mid-song even now, decades later. That moment, a father's song and a daughter's whisper, reminds us all that love doesn't need a stage. It just needs to be heard. Some songs end, but their echoes never die. If this story moved you, share it. Not for fame, but for the reminder it carries, that behind every legend is a human heart still listening. Keep his voice alive, one story at a time.